Overthinkers. What unlikely scenario actually came true that you were completely prepared for because you are an overthinker? My boyfriend, who has zero history of seizures, narrowly escaped passing away because my overthinking led me to break into his house when he didn't answer the phone. My overthinking had begun a few nights prior. He mentioned that he bit his tongue in his sleep and woke up with a red pillow and sore mouth, but he had no memory of it happening. That, for some reason, led my overthinking brain to question, wow, did he have a seizure and not realize it? He has zero history of seizures, and we had been together multiple years, didn't live together but spent nights together. And I had never seen a hint of a seizure, but for some reason, this one stuck in my mind. Fast forward 2 days, we usually don't hang out in the morning because he likes to sleep in late, but on this day, we had an appointment to go see a specific dog at the shelter I was thinking of adopting. He wouldn't answer the phone that morning. I called multiple times before I went to his place, but he never picked up. I started getting a bad feeling, but quelled the he's having a seizure thought because that was clearly so unlikely, meanwhile, making an action plan for that very scenario. So I got to his house and he wouldn't answer, so in a completely not me crazy girlfriend move, I promise, I climbed over his fence. Luckily, his door was unlocked. That's when I found him unconscious and unresponsive, and quickly I jumped into action. I rolled him on his side to help curb aspiration, put a pillow under his shoulder to keep him in that position, and called the ambulance. Had I not hopped the fence to get in, had I not driven over when he didn't pick up the phone, had we not had plans to meet up hours earlier than we usually did, he would have passed away by lunch. His kidneys were already shutting down by the time he reached the ER. If he had never mentioned biting his tongue in his sleep, I don't think I would have been overthinking at all. No crazy worries about seizures would have pushed me to go over and find him. Turns out to be a weird disease that's bizarrely endemic to New Mexico, kind of cerebral cavernous malformations. Several days later, after we got home from the hospital, I got a call from a friend who said the dog, against all odds, was still at the shelter, as in the very dog we were supposed to be seeing that day. I had given up hope on getting her, pushed it out of my priorities while he was hospitalized, but they had forgotten to take down my 24-hour hold sign on her cage, so no one inquired about her. She's now our miracle dog and is the sweetest animal I've ever owned. My boyfriend wouldn't be alive today if we hadn't made an appointment to meet her. Wow, I've just read up on the disease and that is quite a story. And she sounds like the type of person I'd hope to get stranded with on a deserted island or figure out a way to keep the zombies out of our prison. Story 2. This was at 9 years old. We had driven home and seen the beginning wisps of smoke for the California Cedar Fire in 2003. Naturally, I assumed the worst and packed up all my clothes and spent an hour making a travel cage for my guinea pigs. I tied their water bottle to the side so they could drink, packed up their food and their favorite furniture, just in case. I then spent the next few hours monitoring the fire on the news and out in the distance from our window, periodically asking my parents if we needed to evacuate. At some point in the night, the fire sped up like crazy and was literally on the hillside across the street. I went into my parents' room and said, the fire's across the street. Are you sure we shouldn't evacuate? At this point, we all went crazy, grabbing important documents and supplies, and as we were about to lock the doors and drive, I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up already, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up fine thanks to our neighbor putting out embers before it engulfed our house, but if we had gone long enough, my pigs wouldn't have made it. Story 3. I've never told anyone this, but when I was in middle school and going through the awkward age, I used to be terrified of getting a random rise in my fly being down like accidentally. I would be up in front of class, for example, and then randomly get a rise and it would just pop out of my fly in front of the whole class. You know that episode of South Park where Jimmy keeps getting random rises? That was basically my life. Usually I would just tuck it in my waistband and wait for the storm to settle, but I still had the huge fear of it popping out of my fly because I forgot to zip it up. So what did I do? I started wearing my drawers backwards so that even if I forgot to zip up my fly, it wouldn't be exposed. It was a pain to use the urinals, but honestly, I got used to it pretty quickly. Flash forward a couple of months, and I was at the movies with a big gathering of people. It was basically a big group of girls and my group of guy friends. Each guy and girl paired up and made sure to sit next to each other. I was paired with a girl I had a huge crush on. We shared popcorn and soda, and it was a huge moment for me. Shortly into the movie, I got one of those, and I quickly but discreetly stood up and did the old waistband tuck. When I sat back down, I could feel it pop out through my zipper. Thankfully, my backwards boxers kept it from saying hello to my date, but I still panicked and had to cover up in a hurry. She noticed, but I think we can all agree that a sixth grade boy's rise hiding under a layer of drawers is better than just sprouting out bare in the middle of a crowded movie theater. Also, she never said anything to her friends about it. Alright, so his crush might not have seen the light of day, but his panic button sure did. It's like his waistband became a magician's hat and his rise was the rabbit that almost got out and got away. Story 4. When my wife and I were getting married and looking for a place for a ceremony, we found this beautiful but quite remote garden. We were signing the contract for the event and I kept thinking that it was quite remote, so I asked, "How much time does it take for the ambulance to get here?" I became the laughingstock of both families. My then future mother-in-law, who was present at the meeting, literally fell down from the chair laughing. The wedding organizer remembered it for weeks, telling everyone we met. My dad ended every sentence with, "But maybe you need an ambulance for that?" My wife was making siren noises when I was saying something we disagreed on. Every family dinner, all the aunts and uncles were checking if the ambulance were present. You name it, the entire package. It would have taken over an hour for the ambulance to get to the garden. After a few weeks, I ended up paying a private ambulance to be present at the wedding. Fast forward to the ceremony, as my wife literally walks down the aisle. At the back of the garden, I see two paramedics running with a stretcher and my dad squeezing my hand and whispering, "That's not one of your business, let them take care of it." What happened was that one of our older guests had a medical emergency and almost passed away at the ceremony and was saved by the private ambulance. Ever since then, when my wife tells me that I'm overthinking, I just do the siren noise. High fives all around for this guy. Hubby 1, wife 0, because how often does that actually happen, right? Story 5. A year and a half ago, my wife was doing the Susan G. Komen 3-day walk and she was staying in a house that was rented. She had just finished day 2 and her body was essentially done at that point. In the middle of the night, she woke up with severe sweating and dizziness. She started retching and by the next morning didn't feel much better. I get the call, "Can you come take me to urgent care?" This is my wife we're talking about, toughest lady I've ever known, never asked for help with anything. Strong as an ox and about as stubborn as one too. So when she asks me to take her to the hospital, I'm out the door in seconds. I drove down to the house to get her. Before we left, I remember she told me she retched last night. Well, I'd been there the night before to bring our daughter to see her before she fell ill, and I'd played in the sand at the beach with her with some of the beach toys the house had on hand. So I just grab a bucket in case she needs to hurl in it. We made it to urgent care without incident, but I brought that bucket in either way if something goes down. Sure enough, she gets the urge while we're there, and wouldn't you know it, the bathrooms were both occupied. Bucket to the rescue. I felt like a hero. Story 6. I planned my perfect, super awesome Disney World vacation with my bestie for 2 years while we saved up to go. We had reservations for everything, all the right fast passes. There were spreadsheets of what we needed to pack, what we would wear, what we would do. There were even to-the-minute plans of every single thing we would do for 2 weeks. We get off the plane, get to the hotel, unload our gear, and get to the Magic Kingdom right on schedule 30 minutes before it opens. Then my friend turns to me and goes, "I'm hungry." In my infinite wisdom, I forgot to schedule our first meal. Fortunately, because I'd done so much research, I knew exactly where to go. We hopped on a boat and had some delicious French toast at the Polynesian and were back on schedule right away. The schedule was ignored many, many times throughout the trip, but for me, it turned out that overplanning was just the right amount of planning. Plus, I made a fantastic tour guide. Alright, if you're enjoying the video and looking forward to more of these kinds of stories, please don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 7. I was in a marriage where I was treated badly. I'd started planning a way to leave but had an emergency go-right-now bag in case it got really bad. I had spare clothes, a card to a bank account my ex-husband didn't have access to and didn't know I had, some cash, several weeks of my meds, a medical history with my doctor's info in case I was hurt and had to go to a hospital. I hid it in the spare tire wheel space of my car. The top layer was just clothing that I had in some shopping bags. It looked like I had bought clothes without him knowing. Anyway, he found it one day. Luckily, he just took the shopping bag out and got really mad, left everything else. Anyway, I never got to use it for myself because he got arrested, thank God. But afterwards, I noticed a friend had the look of being mistreated. It was pretty clear what was happening. After gently approaching her, she acknowledged that she was being mistreated but didn't feel like she could leave. So I helped her meet up with a fellow advocate, but I also had her change my name on her phone to a pizza shop. I made her a go-right-now bag for her and put it in my car. 30 days later, I got a call for a large cheese pizza with extra sauce. I called 911, drove to her house before the cops arrived and heard her screaming. I knocked the window out and climbed in, saw her husband with a weapon. I just ran and grabbed her, unlocked the door and got her into the car. Had the phone on me the whole time. I had a first aid kit with a ton of wound gauze, so I just pressed that in and waited as the husband tried to take out our window. Finally, I told the 911 operator that I was going to drive down. The cop showed up, arrested the husband, took my friend to the hospital, saved her life, and since her home was a crime scene, she needed the Go Right Now bag. I keep a generic one in my car at all times. I've used more than one for more than a few women and one for a man. Once you've been through it, you can see it. I never want to be unprepared, just in case. Story 8. When backpacking, I'm always the one who over-prepares, sometimes even getting teased by my friends. I carry a comprehensive first aid kit and a few essentials for repairing gear in the wilderness, like super glue, 50 feet of parachute cord, and a small roll of duct tape. We were hiking down the wilderness trail from the Lincoln Trailhead, an old railway bed as straight as an arrow, with a nice campsite at the end. As we arrived and unpacked, a couple approached our tent asking if we had anything to fix a hiking boot. The sole had partially detached from the heel. They planned to hike out the next morning, so the repair didn't need to be perfect, just enough to last the 7-mile flat trek back to the trailhead. I used superglue to reattach the sole and secured it with the duct tape to ensure it set properly. It worked perfectly. Everyone commented on how handy it was that I had brought superglue. I couldn't help but wonder, why would anyone venture deep into the woods without basic supplies to fix their gear? Story 9. At my job, there are numerous things that can go wrong and many settings you can't adjust to fix them or cause more issues. After a month of being called at all hours, day and night, to solve problems, I decided to take a week to create a flowchart of everything that could go wrong. Once the flowchart was implemented, I still got calls because people struggled with reading, and with a constant turnover of new hires, explaining became tedious. So I wrote a script that followed the flowchart exactly. When I received a call, instead of explaining everything, I simply said, "Click the X button." 8 months later, a new executive was hired. He noticed the system I had put in place and called me into his office, asking how many calls I had received to implement such a system. I told him it was most days. He paid me an hour of overtime for each day of the year and took the flowchart to turn it into a mandatory training manual. He also integrated the script into one of the operational interfaces and gave me a promotion. I know stories of bad bosses and incompetent corporations are more sensational, but I overthought every aspect of my job and someone recognized its potential. With all the money he gave me, including the promotion, it was a cost-effective way for the company to acquire such a system. So, my advice is to learn coding and automate your job. If your company fires you for it, they're not very smart. Story 10. I always carry 2 travel toothbrushes, travel-sized toothpaste, a pack of baby wipes, and deodorant. When traveling further, I also bring a change of shirt, a small towel, and extra hairbands, even though I can barely put my hair up. This habit comes from growing up as the oldest of 4 kids and taking care of a child, which made me always prepared. On a school trip to London with my master's course, it suddenly started pouring rain and one of the girls had a white shirt that became see-through. I offered her one of my mini graphic tees and a small face towel from my bag to help her dry off. Being tall and broad at 5'10", I created a makeshift changing room by opening my coat around her, ensuring she had privacy to change. The shirt was too big for her, but it did keep her warm. Another time, I had pre-booked and prepared for a 30-minute train journey, complete with snacks and a portable charger. However, due to an accident and delays, the journey stretched to 4 hours. I was well prepared and could offer a family with 2 kids across the aisle some fruit and let the kids use my sketchbook to draw in. Overthinking and overpreparing can be tedious, but they are worth it when unexpected situations arise. Story 11. How about when paranoia and preparation still doesn't save you from insanity that should not have happened in the first place? I work on small film sets, and one time we had several reproduction weapons we needed to get into a car for a film. The location is out in the boonies on private land, so I knew using the prop weapon out there would be no problem. What I was having extreme anxiety about was the fact that I had to move the weapons from the house to the car in my urban neighborhood. Like I literally rehearsed that moment in my head 6 times. Just have to wrap the weapons in the towel, walk them out to the vehicle, stick them in the trunk. What is there to worry about? So I get those wrapped in the towel, exit the basement door, walk through my driveway, cross the grass of my front lawn, and a guy makes a beeline for me from across the street. Not wanting to be holding weapons while I talk to someone, I put them down on the lawn in front of me. But I noticed that one of the handles is now sticking out of the towel and pretty noticeable. My foot isn't doing a great job of getting the handle covered. The guy asks me if I have any lighter fluid. My brain is firing with anxiety now, and I can't even think straight. I see my partner exit the house with an armload and drop it in the trunk. I yell out to him and ask if he knows if we have any lighter fluid. My partner, not knowing what's going on, heads in the house to look for lighter fluid. Me and this strange man awkwardly stand in my front lawn making horrible small talk like the weather, how's it going? And then the weapon still sits at my feet and is no longer well disguised. I felt like 10 minutes passed like that, terribly wrong. Just when I start to think things will hopefully resolve soon or this guy will get bored and leave, I see a cop car drive by, then casually park down the block. Then the cop gets out and walks up to us. Me, still standing on the lawn with reproduction realistic looking non-marked weapons at my feet, sticking out of their towel disguise, and this stranger standing in front of me. Cop walks up, stands next to the guy, spends a few seconds taking this whole scene in, and then turns to the guy and says, "So I hear you've been asking all over the neighborhood for lighter fluid. Let's take a little walk and talk about it." They both turn and walk down the block. I stand there, stunned for a moment, then grab the sloppy pile of weapons and towel, run to the car, throw them in the back, and close the hatch. Partner comes out and says he can't find lighter fluid, and then also makes a connection finally to ask why the guy needs it anyways. Turned out the poor guy was having an emotional breakdown. Who would have thought that the most dangerous part of filming would be the walk from the basement to the car? Story 12. I've always struggled with anxiety in relationships, often letting it ruin most of them. I get paranoid over small things like not receiving a text back within an hour, and my mind jumps to the worst scenarios: cheating, loss of interest, or something terrible happening to the other person. In 2013, one of my worst fears came true. I was casually dating a girl from college. We lived about 2 hours apart during the summer, so we didn't see each other often. We had plans to meet at her local Walmart one day, and she confirmed our plans the night before, mentioning she was at a party and might not text much. The next day, I texted her in the morning and didn't get a response, assuming she was still asleep. I drove to our meeting spot, but she never replied to my messages or calls. Around 3 p.m., I gave up and tried calling one last time before heading home. Her sister answered, crying, and told me the devastating news. My date had passed away the previous night. She and a friend were in a single car accident after the party. They were both intoxicated. She passed away instantly while her friend, the driver, survived unharmed. This news deeply affected me. Even though we weren't officially serious, it was a tragic event that no one wants to experience. I felt terrible for her family and friends and sent flowers as there was no public funeral. This incident made my anxiety in relationships much worse. I kept telling myself it was a one-time event, but it haunted me for years, making it difficult to maintain any relationship for more than a month. It was a truly awful experience that I don't want to wish on anyone. If any of these stories got to you, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video, and thanks for hanging with me on this one.